in-depth training material and course on designing and implementing policies that promote the nexus between peace, security, and development to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs in Africa by Professor Babafemi A. Badejo and Dr. Gaston Gohu, Module 2, The Nexus in Practice, Case Studies. Introduction. In this module, we shall be highlighting lessons from cases of nexus or interlinkages, planning and implementation in Africa, including both optimal processes and outcomes, and those conditions and contexts which have been challenging and less than ideal. The first case study will be failed approaches, Mali. Case study 2, proposed interlinkages, Somalia. Case study 3, localization, South Sudan. Case study 4, peace building and mixed success, Liberia. The case study 1, failed approaches, Mali. The case study of Mali will be the opportunity to study the impact of the lack of an integrated approach towards sustainable development in a fragile or conflict context and assessing lessons learned. The case of Mali is that of a continuously declining security situation with terror attacks by Islamist extremists working against state and international actors. This continues to leave grave humanitarian challenges. In 2019, according to OCHA, around 4.1 million Malians required humanitarian assistance, while 2.6% of Malians suffer from acute malnutrition. The terrorism and state fragile rankings of Mali have been negatively critical in recent rankings. Trunk and others in 2019 considers the Nexus approach in Mali as total failure, citing preponderance of self-interest and regional and international politics, even in international response, including the UN, the AU, the EU, and ECOWAS attempts at implementing the triple nexus. Major challenges to achieving interlinkages in Mali. The lack of a long-term vision which supports the government of Mali in providing services and security. The prioritization of security over long-term peace building, especially by actors. The exclusion of local actors in planning and implementation processes by international actors are all singled out as major challenges. Inefficient state institutions, weak human rights protection, leadership deficit and corruption continued to undermine progress in the adoption of integrated approach. Security and stabilization enjoyed more attention and prioritization as a result of the prevalence of security challenges in the country. In the same line of thought, Professor Alain Choudin submits that On the contrary, it may be argued that the Malian situation does not represent a proper implementation of the Nexus approach, since the pillars were not linked to a genuine, principled Nexus approach. Principally, the Mali case suggests that the Nexus approach has not been properly pursued because the government is focused on security and there is lack of coordination between the local government and the international community. Anaide Nahikian from the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, HHI, from a study that benefited from 130 interviews with stakeholders in Bamako and Central Mali between December 2018 and March 2019, concludes that the triple nexus approach in Mali is counterproductive and cannot realize the envisaged synergies. The nexus could also entail high risks for independent humanitarian actions, development cooperation, and peace work in Mali. Recommendations for promoting interlinkages in Mali. Adopt guidelines of an ethical, adequate, and robustly communicated, integrated, and coordinated response, one which respects the distinct roles and identities of the stakeholders to optimize efficiency and value add to the beneficiaries. Efforts should be channeled into building a more responsible state that has the capacity to provide better economic situations and opportunities, reduce social inequalities, hence more stability. Promote more effective win-win networking of humanitarian development, peace, and human rights actors, such that the variously sensitive context and principles of each pillar does not become counterproductive. Case study 2, proposed interlinkages, Somalia. The Somalia case is an example of a context in which a nexus approach will go a long way in advancing the respective fields of peace and security, humanitarian aid, development, and human rights. Somalia presents a hypothetically representative and instructive case study for examining the risks as well as the opportunities attributed to an integrated triple nexus approach, especially in terms of understanding localization. Somalia has been in a state of protracted conflict and political instability for decades. This has been characterized by chronic displacements and food insecurity with recurring environmental shocks such as droughts, flooding, and most recently, locusts, which highlights the need for sustainable and preventative responses. The sustained absence of an internationally recognized federal government, recurring armed conflict, and the threat of terrorism and lawlessness continue to pose a barrier to development and investment, leaving the country dependent on humanitarian assistance in addressing chronic vulnerability for decades. Somalia is a priority country for the UN Joint Steering Committee to advance humanitarian and development collaboration and the Humanitarian Development Peace Initiative, HDPI, a joint initiative of the UN and World Bank that emerged from a commitment made at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. Medinilla et al., 2019, in their paper on local governance and humanitarian aid, development, and peace building in Somalia, proposed that a shift from a heavy dependence on humanitarian aid to a nexus approach is required to achieve a sustainable solution for the country. Medinilla et al. Also observed that there is a challenge in the linkage of short-term humanitarian aid with longer-term development cooperation. They suggest that nexus approaches cannot be implemented top-down and propose that localizing the nexus can energize otherwise abstract policy concepts. Accordingly, they recommend that international support efforts move beyond the state to reigniting local development and basic service delivery. They also argue that peace building may be the weakest link in the triple nexus in Somalia, and security and stabilization predominates. Protection lies at the core of humanitarian delivery in Somalia, as set out in the humanitarian country team-led centrality of protection strategy. In the context of Somalia, working at the nexus translates into actions under a range of existing concepts, including resilience, preparedness, and early action, recovery, durable solutions in displacement contexts, inclusion and peace building, and embedding risk. Case study 3, localization, South Sudan. This case study reflects the call for great local participation and ownership across the pillars. After engaging the rationale for these, practical examples that have worked in South Sudan is examined and discussed. Localization refers to everything from the practice of increasing numbers of local staff in international organizations to the outsourcing of aid delivery to local partners to the development of locally specific response models. Studies show that South Sudan presents a good case to interrogate the notion of subnational or local level participation. Arguments for localization. Localization makes for quick and faster response. These actors are typically already on the ground when a crisis occurs. They have access to areas and localities often inaccessible to international actors. They have a better understanding of the local contexts, including the culture, religion, language, and politics. They are better placed to link preparedness, relief, development, and peace. As such, they are better situated to operationalize the triple nexus as they are in situations before, during, and after the crisis, unlike external actors. Their humanitarian response is cost-effective. The salaries of local actors are not as high as those of international staff. Moreover, local actors have a pre-established network they can tap into. Activities implemented by local organizations have a higher and more beneficial impact on local communities, especially when a truly participatory approach is adopted. For example, protection initiatives are often either unknown or perceived as relatively unimportant by people at risk because they were implemented by external agencies rather than local actors. Most humanitarian crises happen in a conflict context that is highly insecure for international organizations. Consequently, international organizations often turn to remote management in partnership with local actors. The criticism of the international system as top-heavy and northern-driven, centralized, bureaucratic, slow and risk-averse, and largely ignoring the value of local knowledge and precluding local and national ownership. The need to balance the supply of international expert staff in senior management relative to their local colleagues, recognizing the indispensability of the local colleagues, especially in conflict and crisis situations. Applicability of interlinkages in South Sudan. The South Sudanese case is illustrative of the triple nexus. The involvement of local church actors in humanitarian aid, development, and peace building have helped minimize internal fragmentation and secure peace through the IGAD peace process by conducting public messaging and awareness campaigns and community-level peace building, pioneering a people-to-people approach to peace. The South Sudan Council of Churches has an action plan for peace, and the Episcopal Church of South Sudan has a Justice, Peace, and Reconciliation Commission, along with other humanitarian and development activities. Church leaders are also said to be the only ones left standing with any credibility and national recognition, enabling them to effectively lobby the international community to support the Southern cause while also brokering peace between communities torn apart by war and ethnic strife. Two positive examples of interlinkages. The Caritas South Sudan has provided humanitarian response, capacity building, and development programs, as well as supporting peace building initiatives such as peace building broadcasts on radio stations. Secondly, Danish Church Aid and its partners implement the Generating Sustainable Livelihoods and Leadership for Peace project, which is comprised of interrelated long-term outcomes, including resilient livelihoods and food security, social cohesion, and peaceful conflict resolution. Case study 4, peace building and mixed success in Liberia. Given the importance of peace in the Nexus approach, The Liberia example presents a helpful case study insofar as it is regarded as a relative success story. However, a critical analysis helps to grasp the necessity of sustainable grassroots approaches that address horizontal inequality and promote inclusive development. Peace-building practice is aimed at constructing long-term peace after years of war. These activities include various reforms such as development, security, legal and institutional reform, peace education, and indigenous peacemaking efforts. Liberia was on a path of crisis characterized with a history of inequality in economic, political, and social dimensions. From the late 1980s to the end of the Civil War in 2003, the country was also rife with corruption and massive human rights violations committed by both non-armed groups and government security forces. S/RES/1509/2003 detailed out a synergistic situational quadruple nexus approach towards state rebuilding in Liberia. The organizations of the UN in Liberia was an avoidance of the silos approach. The UN brought together experts who were coordinated with national leadership towards a coherent, collaborative, and synergistic situational nexus approach. This approach has ensured relative improvements over close to a decade. Quiz and assessments. Many thanks.